So let's solve these equations algebraically. Okay, so algebraically what we want to do is we want to get rid of the square root. We want to be able to undo the square root. Now be careful, because if we try doing something like this, squaring both sides like this, we cannot undo the square root when there's pluses involved here. Okay, square root and plus and minus are not compatible. It's very important that we recognize that square roots and squares are not compatible with plus and minus. So we want to first of all undo that plus with a minus, so we end up with 5x minus 1 is equal to x minus 3. Okay, we want to undo the square. We want to undo the square root with a square, and this is where we could potentially generate an extraneous solution. Now we could also work out our extraneous solution by working out our domain restriction here. So if I were to work out the domain restriction, my domain restriction from this point would be my inside restriction. Remember, there's an inside restriction that must be bigger than 0. There's also an outside restriction that must be bigger than 0. So we know that x must be greater than or equal to 1/5. We also know that x must be greater than or equal to 3. Okay, together this domain becomes x is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, so what we could do when we get our algebraic solutions, we can check it against that domain. Okay, or we can just plug it in. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that it's probably easier that we just plug it in. We just calculate it and see if it works. Okay, that's going to be our kind of our go-to method when we get stuck. Okay, if we want to try doing the domain restriction, that's a little bit more analysis, which is important to be able to do. But right now, if we have difficulty doing that, we always go backwards and use an easier solution or an easier strategy. So here I'm going to end up with getting rid of the square root. I have to remember that there's a minus there, so I have to FOIL. Okay, it's a quadratic, so I need to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to minus 5x from both sides. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Okay, this looks like it's factorable. X minus 10. X minus 1. So we end up with x is equal to 10 and x is equal to 1. Okay, now based on our domain restriction, it looks like we can get rid of this 1 as a possibility. Okay, but we're going to check. Okay, we're going to check our solution. So let's test our solution. So we're going to test x equals 10. Plug it in, we're going to end up with square root of 50 minus 1, which is 49, plus 3 equals 10. So we get 7 plus 3 equals 10. Yeah, that's a good solution. Okay, so we'll give the 10 a check. We're going to test x equals 1. Plug it in, we're going to end up with 5 minus 1, which is 4, plus 3 equals 1. Okay, so we're going to end up with 2 plus 3 equals 1. That's not true. That's extraneous. Okay, so we're going to say that that's an extraneous solution. And we always have to check for extraneous solutions.